Hello and welcome to the Haaretz Podcast. I'm Allison Kaplan-Summer. The fragile ceasefire that was imposed by the United States that had stopped the exchange of fire between Israel and Iran for several months broke down on Sunday. After an Israeli attack on Dakhia, the Hezbollah-controlled neighborhood in Beirut, Iran launched waves of ballistic missiles at Israel on Sunday and Monday, sending Israelis back into shelters with the background noise of sirens. On Monday, the IDF said that it had struck military targets in Iran, and Iranian state media reported that explosions at multiple locations in the country had occurred, including a petrochemical plant, and airstrikes continued in Lebanon as well. Joining me here in Tel Aviv to assess what has happened and discuss what may happen next is Sima Shine and Amos Harel. Sima is a former career Israeli intelligence officer who spent most of her career in the Mossad. She is now a senior researcher at the Institute for National Security Studies and an expert in Iran and the Shiite axis. Amos is, of course, senior defense analyst here at Haaretz. Sima and Amos, thank you so much for coming in and joining me.
Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you.
Everybody is joking now, black humor. Oh, well, now we're back to routine. You know, life is, as we remember it, going on as usual. You feel you're slipping right back into the war routine. Did it take you by surprise what has just happened?
To an extent, yes. It happened very, very quickly. There were threats from both sides, and then it escalated within a few hours, and we found ourselves again in a sort of a war, a resumed war with Iran and probably the Houthis in Yemen as well.
Were you surprised, Sima?
If I'm trying to look on it from an analytical point of view, the Iranians have threatened a week ago that if Israel attacks Beirut, they will attack Israel. But still, I think it happened, as Amos said, it happened very quickly. And there was a feeling as if Israel is not there from the point of view of the U.S., and therefore I was thinking that it will take more time until there are negotiations between the Americans and the Iranians, and something will happen because Trump wanted to stop it, and then it escalated. So in a way, but only in a tactical way, not strategically.
To those who weren't following events as they were unfolding, as we were every moment here in Israel, because we were all, on pins and needles wanting to see what happened, the United States has been pursuing both a peace deal with Iran overall and a temporary ceasefire in Lebanon, basically since April, essentially forcing Israel or pressuring Israel to restrain itself militarily, trying to hammer those out. Why wasn't it able to achieve one? And what exactly broke down that brought us to where we are right now, step by step?
So last Thursday, Trump announced another agreement and another ceasefire between Israel and the Lebanese government. The only problem was that Hezbollah refused to join. And a few hours later, Naim Qassem, the Secretary General of Hezbollah, has said that the agreement that his organization would not respect the agreement. That put Netanyahu in a very difficult situation because he kept promising the Israeli public that he will retaliate for constant attacks against soldiers. We lost 5 soldiers last week in Lebanon and against Lebanese border communities in the Galilee. So he had to do something. Trump did not allow him to attack in the Dakhia in southern Beirut until yesterday morning. There was another barrage of rockets from the Lebanese side by Hezbollah. This time Israel retaliated. We don't know exactly what went on between Trump and Netanyahu. I would assume that there was something between the green and yellow light to Israel, allowing Israel to attack. I can't imagine Netanyahu doing this without any kind of consent from Trump.
But Trump was saying publicly, don't attack Beirut. I'm telling Israel not to attack Beirut.
That was last week. Okay. This week, things may have changed. We don't know what went on in those conversations. Once we did attack, and that was a singular attack and quite limited. There were 2 people killed there. It wasn't as if the Dakhia, the southern quarter of Beirut, was in flames. It isn't what happened. But that was enough for Iran to retaliate and to launch missiles towards Israel. Then came Trump again. Towards midnight last night, Israeli time, he talked to Barak Ravid of Channel 12, told him that he was trying to stop this, that, okay, both sides launched some missiles, but it was time to forgive and forget or whatever. This didn't materialize that way. Within a few hours, Israel struck Iran. Again, we don't know exactly.
After Iran struck Israel.
After Iran struck Israel. Again, we don't know who said what to whom between the two of them. I would assume that this isn't Netanyahu actively doing what he likes without receiving any kind of agreement from Trump.
Defying Trump, he wouldn't do that.
I don't think that he would defy Trump under the circumstances. They went through a lot. The relationship usually is quite close and quite effective. This is too dangerous for him. On the other hand, politically, he's in a domestic mess. If he doesn't react to such a direct attack against Israel, then what does he say to his voters, right-wing voters who care a lot about Israeli honor and so on? This was a real provocation from the Iranian side. So he had to act. We'll have to wait and see. I think my guess would be that Trump would do everything in his power to restrain both sides and to stop this as quickly as he can. But this is getting very, very complicated because as we speak, there are still Israeli strikes in Tehran, and Israel is killing Iranians, and the regime would not really want to let this go.
I think what is interesting in what Amos has said and in the picture that we see is that the Iranians decided to wake up and to attack. That was after a long time that of a ceasefire where they are not attacking. And what is important in that is that Iran wants to make sure that its relations with the proxies in the region are established, are respected, and everybody knows that they can use the proxies in order to attack Israel. There was a change after the war that Israel conducted against Hezbollah, Nasrallah killing and all these pages and everything that happened, and the agreement that was accepted between Hezbollah and Israel in November 2024, as if the proxies are not anymore relevant to Iranian security. And they have, in the last year and a half, they have supported Hezbollah with money, with ammunition, smuggling through Syria, in spite of the change in Syria, and in other ways, in order to make sure that the proxies know that Iran is behind them and that they can show to the world that they have reconstructed those proxies, even if they are not in the same mind that they were in the past, but still they are effective and relevant. And I think this is a message, a very important strategic message from Iran to the US on one hand, but to the region on the other hand. We are here, we are planning to stay here, we are strong, and we are not going to give up. And this is something important because we, at the end of the day, we are waiting for an agreement between Iran and the US that will put an end to this war, and of course will also handle the two major issues. One is Hormuz, and two is the nuclear issue. For Israel is one and not two, is much more important than any other issue.
And it seems like Israel is pushing back by trying to separate the conflicts. The ambassador from Israel to the United States made a specific statement saying if Hezbollah hits Israel, Israel will respond in Lebanon. If Iran hits Israel, Israel will respond in Iran. It seems like they're pushing back at the confluence of Iran and its proxy.
So it's hard to say what exactly the Netanyahu strategy is regarding this. One thing that is clear is his domestic problem that I mentioned, that politically, in the eyes of his right-wing voters, he needs to appear tough. He also has an interest in prolonging the war because as long as this happens, Israel is still in a state of emergency and there's less talk of what happened on October 7th. And he doesn't need to acknowledge his mistakes there. So Netanyahu's interest, first and foremost, is surviving in Israeli politics, remaining out of jail. And one of the ways to achieve that is by a continued war on some fronts. On top of that, he's very, very suspicious of agreements with the other side. We saw that. The ceasefire, as Sima has mentioned, was the agreement was signed November 24, but that was the only case. In most of the other cases, the war just goes on. And this is what he wants in Iran as well. He doesn't want the war to stop, and he doesn't want an agreement which would include American concessions to the Iranians on the nuclear issue. So for him, it's almost a win-win. If he continues to fight, then okay, there will be some losses here, but the public debate would be diverted to the current issues, and he could seem tough. He could have his photos taken with brave soldiers and pilots and so on, and people would discuss less our sorry state of events on other issues, everything from the fiasco of October 7th to the economy and the fact that everything has stopped to a halt here for quite some time because of the war.
Sima, it seems as if the Iranians are also interested in prolonged conflict. Correct me if I'm wrong, that the more that they keep going and stay intransigent in the negotiations and empower their proxies like Hezbollah to attack, the more I guess they think they can wear the United States down on the nuclear issue and on the Strait of Hormuz?
Actually, I don't think the Iranians want to prolong the war. I think they would prefer to stop the war, but on their terms. And this is the main problem. They are negotiated with the Americans for quite a long time. And not only that they cannot come to any conclusion, Trump is changing his mind from time to time. And even vis-a-vis the Iranians, one day he says one thing and the other day, and the Iranians, they don't believe him. No trust between the Americans and the Iranians, between the Iranians and the Americans. Iran feels that it can do it. It can retaliate. It can attack. It can be a tough negotiator. They feel, in spite of everything that is happening in Iran, we shouldn't think that Iran is has the upper end. They can do everything. No, that's not the situation. They are much more determined. They are willing to pay the price, and therefore they have the upper end in the negotiations. But the economic situation is very bad. It was before the war. It's even worse now. They are selling less in the last months, less oil, and if the closure on the Hormuz will continue, it will become more and more difficult for them. And there is also an ongoing internal debate whether to negotiate with the Americans or not. So the situation is not the best situation that they would dream for. But in the current situation, they want to be in a position that they can dictate their will, and that is, and they have succeeded in one very important element. The Americans accepting 2 stages of negotiations, that the first stage will be Hormuz and the end of the war, and the nuclear issue, which is the pretext of this war, will be in the next phase. There are those who say 60 days. Trump said it will not be more than 60 days, and I argue that it will be much more than 60, and it will be prolonged to 120, and God knows if there will be any agreement on the nuclear issue, because Iran doesn't need an agreement that is demanding from it to take out its material and to stop enriching and everything. And therefore, I think at the end of the day, this war, we don't know if it will be a short one or a long one. I assume it will be a short one, because the negotiations will continue, and the Interior Minister of Pakistan in Tehran now trying to persuade the sides. We know that the Qataris are working very difficult in order to persuade the sides to go back to negotiations. And the end result will be again going to negotiations, but the terms will be dictated by the Iranians.
They say that Trump will never agree to conditions that are worse than the JCPOA because of, that political confrontation and him getting rid of it. Does it seem to you as if the Iranians would settle for conditions that are less advantageous to them than the JCPOA?
No, even for the JCPOA, they will not go now. I mean, this agreement had a lot of flaws, and there were problems with this agreement, especially the fact that it legitimized the enrichment, and that it was for a short period of time, only 15 years. So there were problems with this agreement. But this agreement, first of all, put Iran in a situation where it couldn't break out for a nuclear device in a short time. And that is not the situation today if the material stays in Iran. One has to understand, if there is no agreement on the nuclear issue, and my guess is that there will be very difficult to reach an agreement. The material will be there. They know how to enrich it to military side. They know how to do all the procedure in order to get to a nuclear device. I think the motivation for a nuclear device is higher than it was before. With Khamenei, we could question whether he will do the extra mile. I don't think with Mujtaba we are there, especially after the war and all the price that they have paid. And no question that they probably have centrifuge somewhere in a secret site, because from 2021, there is no inspection on producing advanced centrifuge. And therefore, there is no reason to believe that part were deployed in the sites and part are somewhere else. So Iran is now in a much better position to break out to a nuclear device if they decide to do it, and if Israel and the US does not attack, and if. But from the technical point of view, they are closer than they were in the JCPOA.
Amos, talk to us about the Netanyahu-Trump dynamic from what we've watched since February, since April. We had Trump, according to a report yesterday, saying explicitly, I call the shots. Netanyahu does not call the shots.
Yeah, but if you have to repeat that, then maybe that means that you don't actually call the shots.
Exactly. Well, that's what I'm saying. Are the signals that Trump is giving in the front of the cameras very different to what you think is happening behind the scenes? Because there seems to be a contradiction. On one hand, he kind of wants to say that or indicate that Netanyahu is pulling him into conflicts that he doesn't want to get into on one hand. On the other hand, he's saying, I call the shots, I'm the boss, so you can't have it both ways.
So it's a complicated relationship by now. It's been very close for quite some time, and you've mentioned the fact that they've known each other for years, and between 2017, 2021, in Trump's first term in office, Netanyahu could persuade Trump to do almost everything, including getting out of the JCPOA in 2018, and perhaps the roots of Iran's surge forward with its attempting to reach a nuclear bomb, to producing one, have to do with that period. Now, as we go back to his second term, to the beginning of the second term, what we could see is time after time, the Israeli media felt that Trump had enough with Netanyahu. At one point or another, he would tell Netanyahu what to do and so on. And every time, magically, there were all of these forecasts, and then they met, and Trump came into the meeting with his own views and came out of the meeting with Netanyahu's views. Remember him talking about a possible transfer of Palestinian population, forced transfer of population in Gaza, all this talk about Gaza as a Riviera with hotels and so on. These were ideas that Netanyahu, to an extent, planted in his mind. But this time, I think it's a bit different. Why? Because unlike the previous round with Iran in June 2025, this time it doesn't seem to appear as a success. What we now know, according to the New York Times, is that in February, when they met at the White House, it was Netanyahu who convinced him to go for a joint attack against the Iranians, and it was Netanyahu who told Trump that Mossad could deliver a regime change in Iran. Now, this apparently didn't happen. Whether it was because Trump has forbidden the Kurds to join, as Netanyahu was planned, or because of many other reasons, including the fact that those same brave Iranians who took to the streets in January this year were not able to do that again once the war started. It was too frightening for them. Anyway, the war at this point is a mess. It did not reach a point of a regime change, and it's quite clear that the Americans are looking for somebody to blame. And this is why we have those constant leaks, including the last one to the New York Times, blaming Israel for eavesdropping on American conversations regarding Iran, and so on. I think some of this is made up. I think it's a message to the Israelis, this time it's your fault. You have to take the blame for this, because otherwise the president would be in too much trouble. So I think there's tension right now. What I don't know exactly is what Trump allows Netanyahu to do, because in two cases, Trump announced that things would be restrained, in Lebanon and then in Iran. And in both cases, Netanyahu acted differently.
Because of internal political pressures?
Yeah, of course. But what I find hard to believe is that Netanyahu would actually confront Trump and do that in spite of a direct order, so to speak, from the president. I think that they left some leeway there, that there was enough space for Netanyahu to maneuver, and that Trump could deny knowing exactly what has happened. The test, as we speak on Monday morning or close to noon, the test would be what Trump would tell Netanyahu now. Would he allow Netanyahu to keep fighting and risk a resumed war in the Gulf, something that's quite evident that Trump doesn't want to happen? Or would he try to restrain both sides and reach an agreement first for a ceasefire and then go ahead, as Sima has mentioned earlier, and search for a final agreement with the Iranians?
As you said, we're in very early hours. Can we tell yet from the choice of targets that Israel has attacked in Iran whether Israel is staying within certain red lines that Trump has set?
I'm not so sure. There are first reports that targets were struck close to Tehran, and also that at one case there was some target that had to do with the gas industry.
Yeah, he said that energy targets in the last round
sure,
were off base.
I'm not sure that this could be considered national strategic civilian infrastructure, which is something that Trump did not allow us to do last time. There were one or two cases in which Israel struck, and then he kept his distance from that action. So I'm not sure that we're going that far, but we will know within a few hours because there are more and more Israeli strikes. And it will be very interesting to see whether they settle for anti-aircraft systems or military targets, or they go all the way against the energy market. Because going against the energy market would affect gas prices at home gradually, and that's a big deal for Trump.
I don't think Israel will do it. There is probably one petrochemical plant which is close to, but it's not energy. I don't think Israel will go for energy because of Trump. Because, of course, Israel believes that this is should be a target because it will have also implications for the future. Iran will not be able to export so much, and etc. But from what I understand, Trump doesn't want it. The Gulf states, of course, and that's what the Iranians are threatening, that they will attack not only in Haifa, the liquid gas, but also in the Gulf. The question whether Israel can continue this war without the U.S. Would
it?
No, I think Israel will not do it. And I think Iran understands it. And the fact that Trump will see what he is tweeting in an hour when he wakes up and starts tweeting. But I think he wants to distance himself from Israel. And I believe that there is an ongoing dialogue between Israel and the U.S. that will put limits on Israel's activity. And we might see also a decision of Iran not to continue, because they have said that we are not afraid, we attacked Israel, we are committed to our proxies. So the important message that they wanted to bring was already said. They don't have to continue because they know that at the end of the day, Israel can attack a lot of things that are important for Iran. So I think the message was there, and it might be, we have to see how it develops, but it might be that both sides, Israel and Iran, will, especially Iran, of course, and the US on the other side, will decide that we should stop it. So it might be a very short round of attacks of both sides. I think there is an ongoing debate in the U.S. within the circles around the president on the issue of Israel, how to handle it. It's not anti-Israel, of course, but there are rumors that the vice president is not very happy with the war from the beginning. Then that he was the one who told Erdogan about the Kurdish plans of the Mossad. My feeling is, and of course the fact that the Pentagon has come out with this, which I don't think are correct. I don't think Israel is doing anything following, American leaders or something like that. I don't think this is the case. Actually, Israel can know very much from the Iranian side. It doesn't have to follow Americans, because the Iranians are also part of the negotiations.
Really, you think the Pentagon would leak that Israel is watching them when
it might be true? Vance and not the Pentagon. Yeah.
It might be someone who is
someone close to the vice president. Yeah.
Someone who wants to put Israel back in the box. If it's correct, Israel has to take it into account, because part of our strength is our relations with the U.S. and the support that we get from the U.S.
Has to take the growing hostility, I guess you could use a strong word, to Israel, or resentment of Israel in Republican circles that are now close to the levers of power in the Pentagon and the White House.
First of all, we saw the vote in the Congress against the war. 4 Republicans joined the Democrats. So that means that there is enough people in the party that are willing even to vote against the president. Not to talk about those that are not happy with the situation, but are not going to vote yet. So in the Congress. So I think there is a continuing erosion of the situation of Israel in the Republican Party, and I think Israel has to take it into account, because at the end of the day, Netanyahu is counting on President Trump and not on anyone else, and therefore he has to join his decision and his will, and therefore it might be that we'll see a closure of this round.
People are mentioning other factors, the World Cup, Trump's 80th birthday, the sensitivity, obviously, to rising oil prices as reasons for not extending this conflict. Do you think that any of these are really
all these are contributing to his position, but it's more than that. I think that, generally speaking, I think he's had enough of us. He's fed up with this region. This is taking a lot longer than he thought, and it's less successful than he assumed. And he's paying huge prices at home, domestically, because of the economic influence and so on. And he doesn't seem that tough anymore. So there are many, many reasons for him to search for a solution which would end this war. It's true that there are not many American casualties. It's not Vietnam. There are hardly any American boys going back home in body bags. But this is bad enough for him, and I don't see any real interest in prolonging this war from Trump's perspective, except for the one fear that he may seem too weak on Iran, that he may seem to be coerced by the Iranians. So as long as he maintain, at least in his own view, this image of being tough, that's enough for him. That's a good enough excuse to end everything, but it hasn't ended yet. And of course, Netanyahu is a spoiler here in a way. Netanyahu's interests are very different than Trump's, and especially the Iranians' interests. And I think that there's a danger here that Israel could be seen, on top of what Sima has mentioned, on top of us being blamed for what happened earlier, for the failures earlier, we could find ourselves being blamed for dragging this war and getting the Americans in a whole new mess in the Middle East, which is problematic.
And that's coming on top of, world outrage on the West Bank and Gaza and all of that. It's, an additional layer.
And of course, you have to remember what we see on the Israeli TV against Netanyahu always is Netanyahu staying in the parliament, in the Knesset, and saying a leader, a prime minister in Israel has to be able to say no to the American president. And we see it again and again.
People keep pulling it out of the archives, right? Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
And therefore he is in a huge problem. He cannot say no openly. On the other hand, he wants to do things that later he will say, I said no and I did that and that. So he is in a situation. And at the end of the day, I think from Israel's point of national security, he cannot say no to the president. And I hope he will not say, because if he is taking into account Israel's national security, he has to be in good terms with Trump and with the American establishment. It's not only Trump. He's on the verge of being blamed that he actually decided to do the Dahya, knowing that Iran will retaliate, and we see everywhere that the security establishment in Israel saw that might be one of the results. And doing that in a consent, that will jeopardize the chances of an agreement between the Americans and Iran. An agreement that Netanyahu thinks will not be in favor of Israel.
Long term, Sima, I had your colleague at INSS, Danny Citrinowitz, on, and his main point to me was that Israelis may see Netanyahu as the great, powerful leader who got the American president to attack Iran, and he, stood up to Iran and has confronted Iran. But long term, he thinks that all of these episodes has really deteriorated or even destroyed Israel's deterrence vis-a-vis its enemies. Do you agree with him?
I think I differ from him in two elements. One, I don't think Israel's position in the region from the point of view of deterrence has deteriorated. At the end of the day, the 7th of October is the deterioration of our deterrence posture. And therefore, there was a need, an urgent need, to improve our strategic standing in the region. On the other hand, I completely agree that by supporting and fueling the notion that Israel has influenced the president to go for this war. And there are a lot of voices here in Israel, and there is also the voice saying only Netanyahu could do it. I think by that, we deteriorated our situation in the U.S. And that is, from my point of view, the most important thing, because we need the U.S. Support, the U.S. public support of both parties, and we don't have it today. And the anti-Israel sentiment in all polls that we see in the U.S. is very dramatic, deteriorating very dramatically and in a worrisome way. So this is the main problem. I think in the region there is a lot of criticism on Israel because the region is paying a lot because of that of this war. But I don't think that our posture, deterrence posture, has suffered. Our policy, our strategy, Netanyahu himself, I hear in the region many that are waiting to see Netanyahu being replaced. They say he brought all the problems, but that's not the deterrence of Israel. It's only our policies, our aims. There is a lot of thinking. I have to raise it also here that Israel wants to expand its borders, and there is a lot of criticism on all our buffer zones in Lebanon, in Syria, in Gaza. There is a lot of criticism in the region. It's not the deterrence of Israel, but it is criticism of its policies and its strategic aims.
I want you to talk about deterrence, your views, Amos, but also I always ask for a check-in on the state of the IDF when I speak to you, how they're holding up for yet another round of conflict after pretty much an unrelenting 3 years of being on high alert, not to mention the political influences coming from Netanyahu's government.
So Iran is less of an issue for the IDF because the ground forces are not involved. The main issue is this war of attrition going on in Gaza, in Lebanon, and to some extent even in the West Bank.
Lebanon, we've had a huge amount of casualties.
That's a big deal. It affects people's motivation to serve. It affects the reservists who now are supposed to serve 100 days or more this year, and so on. Iran is a different matter and has to do mostly with the Air Force, the intelligence community, and the Home Front Command. I think Israel can handle another round of that. The question is how successful we are. It's all about, again, going back to deterrence, it's about translating the advantage, the tactical advantage or operational advantage you have to actual strategic gains. And this is where we keep failing, but that's not the army's fault. It's mostly about the government and Netanyahu's refusal to reach agreements because this is domestically problematic for him. If going back a little, the October 25 hostage deal. Remember Netanyahu telling Trump and previously telling Biden that he can't do this, that he can't go into too serious concessions because Ben Gvir and Smotrich would fight it, or because there will be huge protests and so on. There was not a single person on the right wing took to the streets protest against the final hostage deal. So Netanyahu's domestic issues, he has his problems that we've mentioned, but it's not about his coalition partners. In all of these cases, these guys need the government to continue as much as he does, and we're absolutely cynical about that. That's not the big deal.
Well, it's going to have to end sometime because we've got elections coming out. So this coalition can only hold together for a certain amount of time.
Okay, I beg to differ even on that because there's always
They might delay elections because of the war?
Yeah, because if that goes on for a while, it's a perfect excuse. We've seen autocrats do that in the past, and we know what Netanyahu would like to do.
He certainly uses it as a reason to get out of his trial, so maybe he'll use it as a reason to get out of elections too.
I can't rule this out completely. If worst comes to worst, if the war goes on for a long time, there may be people saying, okay, we can't go to vote under these conditions. That wouldn't go on forever, but it's a good excuse to push the elections even
And I would
further.
add to that, I agree completely, and I would add to that probably this war will be ended because of the interest of the U.S. But I don't exclude the possibility, and I think there is even a preparing of the background that there will be an Israeli operation in Gaza, and things will because Gaza doesn't go anywhere, Hamas doesn't go anywhere. He is more and more ruling the part that is left in Gaza, and this could be a pretext for something else. I completely agree. There is a ongoing concern in Israel, in big numbers of in big part of the population, that Netanyahu might decide to, if he feels that in the polls and everywhere, in polls that he is doing, not that are published, that he is going to fail in these elections, that he will do something that will have to postpone the elections.
Amos and Sima, I don't like the reasons that bring you to the studio, but I really like the fact that I'm having you here. And thank you so much for coming and sharing your insights and analysis with us. I want to say come back soon, but again, I wouldn't want the reasons for you coming back soon necessarily to happen.
We'll come to talk about the peace.
Exactly. Yeah, the big peace deal. But in the meantime, thank you so much and stay safe.
Thank you.
And that's it for this episode of the Haaretz Podcast. Thanks to my guests, Sima Shine and Amos Harel, and to producer and editor Adi Shacham. If you'd like to keep listening to the podcast and make sure you never miss an episode, don't forget to subscribe to us on Apple or on Spotify or YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're so inclined, leave us a comment and a 5-star rating. That way more people can find us. And to keep up with all of the news on Israel, the Middle East, and the Jewish world, don't forget to subscribe to and follow Haaretz.com. I'm Alison Kaplan-Summer, and until next time, shalom from Tel Aviv.